I want to start tonight's program focusing on something that you think might not be related, but it actually is. I want to start talking about a story that happened here about almost 90 days ago. About 90 days ago. A little over that, actually. An article about Saks. Saks, at the time, was suing a reporter for Puck News. Suing a reporter for Puck News, claiming that their outlet was running hit pieces against Saks, and talking about the reporter's conflict of interest. Says here, luxury giant Saks Global this was back in October 2025, 90 days ago, 3 months ago. Saks Global sued the publisher of Puck News, claiming that the site failed to disclose a reporter's conflict of interest as he churned out a series of negative, quote, hit pieces on the company that have allegedly costed hundreds of millions of dollars. The owner of Saks Fifth Avenue, and Neiman Marcus, alleges that Puck News columnist William D. Cohen, whose books have included House of Cards about the 2008 financial crisis, penned a series of articles this year, this is 2025, that falsely suggested the privately owned retailer would file bankruptcy. So 3 months ago, this guy writes a number of articles saying Saks Fifth Avenue, who also owns Neiman Marcus, Saks Global is going to go bankrupt. They're in financial trouble. They're going bankrupt. In their lawsuit, it said that Puck failed to disclose that Cohen had an axe to grind, noting that he had admitted he had previously been fired from a financial firm where he worked with, quote, individuals who would go on to lead Saks Global's biggest investor, according to the complaint filed on Tuesday in Delaware State Court. So, Saks sued because this guy here wrote a series of articles last year informing the public that Saks was in financial trouble, that Saks was heading to bankruptcy. Their response was to sue him and his publisher. Well, folks, 90 days later, and 90 days later, this happened. 2 days ago, Saks Global files for bankruptcy. What? Amid luxury market strains. You want to know the extent that these companies will go to, that their CEOs will go to, that their leaders will go to in order to conceal these things until the very last moment. And isn't it interesting? Right after they get to the new year, just as soon as the new year starts, they file for bankruptcy. So in other words, Mr. Cohen was dead on that was exactly what was occurring the entire time. I want to go down to the article here just a little bit. Saks Global, the parent company of luxury retailer Saks Fifth Avenue, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection late Tuesday, not even Tuesday morning. The company has struggled with a heavy debt load following its purchase of rival Neiman Marcus in 2024. Saks was in a precarious financial situation before its Neiman merger, and the combination of luxury department stores failed to drive enough efficiencies to overcome the company's massive debt load. So in other words, they tried to pull an LVMH. They tried to pull a Bernard Arnault, and it didn't work. The merger was also ill-timed, as Americans have shifted their retail habits in recent years away from big department stores.
Lie.
Actually, this is not true, but then again, the old defunct legacy media, they've been saying this now for 20 years, and in reality, the evidence is actually going in the other direction. Some legacy retailers, some have struggled to keep up. Macy's closed hundreds of stores in 2024, and Lord & Taylor went out of business in 2020. Many shoppers have grown disillusioned. Many shoppers, who are the shoppers? Many shoppers have grown disillusioned with the luxury market in particular, complaining about higher prices for lower quality items. And those who are still shopping luxury are increasingly buying from the brands themselves in a direct-to-consumer strategy, cutting out middlemen like department stores. Now, there's a reason why I'm bringing this up. Just to cap this off here, Saks has struggled to pay its vendors. In early January, Metric stepped down as CEO. Okay. He steps down right after they sue people. Okay. Reportedly, after the company missed a large debt payment. So he was the guy in charge. And remember, the CEOs and whatnot, they know the company's true financial condition. They know the company's true financial health. So if he steps down and then a couple of weeks later, the company files for bankruptcy, he knew this was coming the whole time. He knew it was coming the whole time. So that was going on there while this was happening. If they knew this was coming, why in the world were they suing people? Why in the world were they suing people if they knew that that was what was coming? But more importantly, why is it that this happened in the first place? And that's the part that they were getting to down there. They are in trouble. They are in trouble. And the reason that they are in trouble is because Gen X and Gen Z are no longer buying from these people in the amounts that they used to. Let me go ahead and give you a brief reminder here. If you'll remember Saks and the Macy's Day Parade, when we were children, they were all staples. They were all staples. The Thanksgiving Day Parade, remember, for those of us who are half a century old, you used to watch that on television. Oh man, that was a staple on TV. Every holiday season, remember they used to have the Spider-Man float, the Snoopy floats, the Macy's Day Parade. Oh, they'd be going by all these stores on 5th Avenue and 34th Street and whatnot. Remember that as children, even as adolescents to a certain extent, and then you started watching it go down. What I'm telling you is that our parents and grandparents, these were staples. This is how powerful these companies were. This was how large their clientele was. This was how stable their profits were. This was how dominant they used to be. That for our parents and grandparents, these were just staples, like the Super Bowl. Don't tell me about what can last forever and what's never going to go away. We all remember when you used to have these parades all the time and they're no longer there. Or at least not nearly the force they used to be. Because those were events. Those were things the television networks could center their programming around. Those were events. No longer. What changed? What happened? I'll tell you what happened. The World War II generation built the wealth, and the World War I generation and World War II generations built up the wealth, and the baby boomer generation did not increase the wealth. They just went straight to squandering it. And now, as all of them are dying out because they're no longer just getting old, they are now just dying out completely. They're in their 70s, 80s, and older. They squandered all the wealth, and because the children don't have any, the dollar has been devalued. You're in an era of basic pseudo hyperinflation. Your parents didn't have outsourcing all over the damn place. Your parents didn't have 401ks to replace a real pension. Your parents didn't have corporations where the CEO was getting paid 1,000 times what the workers were getting paid. So you see, your parents could actually afford to patronize these companies. They could actually afford to do it. What you're coming up on is the answering of a great capitalist fundamental question. How are you, if you liquidate all the wealth from the workers, if you outsource all the wealth from the workers, if you outsource the jobs, if you take away the wealth and everything, how are you going to keep these companies in business if you make it your job to get rid of the workers, get rid of the workers' wages, get rid of the workers' payments, liquidate as much as you can? How are you going to keep these companies in business? And what you're finding out is they can't. They can't. It's all falling down and all going to hell. Need more of a reminder? You need more of one? Oh, it goes well beyond just the regular here. Forbes has put out an article that some of you may have heard about. If you hadn't, let's go ahead and get you up to speed. Is the world going sober? $830 million wiped off liquor stocks as Jim Beam halts output.
What? Damn!
You are not on your way to trouble. You're not on your way to collapse. You're not on your way to things going badly. You're already there. You are already in the middle of it. This was as of January 2nd, a little bit over a week ago. I mean, right after New Year's, people. Right after the new year. Neiman Marcus, Saks Global files for bankruptcy. Jim Beam says we're halting output. Yeah, they all waited till the beginning of the year and then dropped the hammer. Let me go. I want to read from this article here in Fortune because I want you all to see what they're talking about. Says, here's some sobering news. One of America's most storied whiskey makers is going silent, at least for a year. For a year. Jim Beam, the 230-year-old Kentucky bourbon icon, will halt production at its main Claremont distillery for all of 2026.
Damn!
Marking the first pause in modern history at the flagship site. The move sends shockwaves through Kentucky's $9 billion bourbon economy. $9 billion in Kentucky. You're about to take a hit. And signals deeper cracks spreading through the global alcohol industry. The stoppage occurs at the same time as nearly $830 billion has been erased from the market value of the world's leading beer, wine, and spirits companies for over 4 years, according to Bloomberg Index. So they need to get this title straightened out. It says million up here, but it says billion down here. Over 4 years, according to the Bloomberg Index, a downturn is fueled by a potent mix of trade tensions, oversupply, shifting consumer habits. Who are the consumers? Shifting consumer habits and mounting health concerns. A sector once viewed as recession-proof. You mean the baby boomers and whatnot? The baby boomers and whatnot? Yeah, they were able to get drunk as a skunk. They were able to get drunk as a skunk back then. Your old granddaddy, your uncle, they could afford to do that. You can't afford to do that. You see, the job had to keep them. Outsourcing wasn't a threat. Outsourcing them wasn't an option. For you, they're looking for reasons to get rid of you. What if people are simply choosing to drink less? So they go on down here, and I want to skip down to this part here. For Kentucky distillers who rely on long-term export contracts, the sudden market freeze from the tariff war was devastating. Bourbon ages slowly. Barrels filled years ago can't be easily rerouted to new buyers. Instead, they simply piled up, where they are now sitting on a record 16.1 million aging barrels. For those of you who don't know how spirits are made or how bourbon is made and liquors are made like that, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, and whatnot, the whiskeys, they have something called the aging house. You should go look up the documentaries on these things. They're rather fascinating, but they put them in these wooden barrels because the wooden barrels, of course, if they're made of maple or whatever, they soak up the flavor and whatnot from the wooden barrels, and they put them in these big wooden silos they call the aging houses. And they sit there, in some cases, they'll sit there in the aging houses for years. But eventually, when they reach their potency, they're supposed to leave the aging houses and go get bottled. The problem is if people are canceling contracts, there's nowhere to bottle them to send them to because nobody stores stuff anymore. At least companies don't want to store things anymore. They want just-in-time distribution, what they call it, which means they want to minimize their warehousing because they're trying to cut costs as much as they can. Now that you have entire industries that don't warehouse things, they just do just-in-time distribution, well, they've now strangled their ability to store these things. For nearly 2 decades, they say, distillers scaled up aggressively, betting that global demand would keep climbing well into the 2030s. Did they actually look at the customer base to see whether or not that was true? Did they actually check on that to see if that was true? Or did they just sit up here and say that, well, it's going to keep going up because you need it to keep going up? Did they do that because they did a market analysis that showed, yeah, this is going to keep, the party's going to keep going on? Or did they say this because they needed to say it to keep shareholders happy, to keep lenders continuing to give money? Somebody said that America used to make products and services. Now America just makes bubbles. It was a bourbon gold rush of sorts, but bourbon's long aging cycle, often 6 to 10 years, turned the excitement around expansion into a liability. Jim Beam's parent company, Suntory Global Spirits, now faces both excess inventory and weaker demand, forcing the 1-year halt at its main U.S. site. Nearly 1,500 Kentucky jobs are tied to operations at that Claremont facility. The company says layoffs aren't planned.
Wanna bet? Lie.
Tours, bottling, and storage will continue while production will shift to smaller sites. Diageo has also reduced whiskey production in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Texas. Oversupply is industry-wide. Now, why is that? Are drinking habits really changing? 830 million gone and counting. Okay, they need to choose a number and stick with it. The short answer is yes. In a recent Gallup poll, research shows that drinking is at a record low. Could it be that Gen X and Gen Z did not want to be like their parents? Could it be that now that we are having to seize the reins and controls of power, that they've decided they don't want to be like their parents? So the staples of alcohol and getting sloshed in liquor, the Gen X and Gen Z have moved away from that, as identifying it as cultural failure. Currently, only 54% of U.S. adults are drinking alcohol. That percentage is the lowest figure since the 1930s. So in other words, prohibition. Why didn't they say that? So in other words, the lowest has been since basically prohibition. When Gallup began tracking this data, that number sat at 62% in 2023 and 58% in 2024. For the first time, over half of Americans now consider even moderate drinking harmful to their health. The decline is most pronounced among women, down 11 points, and young adults, down to 50%, with men and older drinking adults showing decreases too. Younger consumers, especially Gen Z, following in Gen X's footprints, are embracing non-alcoholic lifestyles or choosing cannabis or mocktails and leaning into well-oriented alternatives. This is in addition to the rise of GLP-1 weight loss drugs like Ozempic, of which 1 million Americans are currently using, and that reduce appetite and alcohol cravings. A Bloomberg index tracking about 50 global alcohol companies now sits 46% below its 2021 peak, erasing roughly $830 million of value. European powerhouse stocks and holding companies, Diageo, Pernod Ricard, and Rémy Cointreau, have seen their market caps plunge to decade-long lows. Chinese Baijiu giant Qichao Mutai is down over 40% from its high, while brands from Brown-Forman to Treasury Wine Estates in Australia have slumped. In China, government alcohol bans at official events have continued to choke premium spirit sales. So, yeah, it's getting rough out there. They're looking around and they're finding things like this. They're looking around and they're finding things like this. This is from USA Today. Move over, dry January. Gen Z is already stepping away from alcohol. So this is not a momentary aberration. This is a full-scale change in lifestyle. This is a full-blown cultural change in lifestyle. How did these people miss it? How did they miss it? How in the world did they miss the fact that this was going to happen? How? It goes beyond that, though, folks. It goes beyond that. You see, these other folks out here have been making up things as they go along, and they want you to believe everything's all right because they've got something to sell. They've got something to sell, and as a result, they want you believing things. They want you to believe things. You see, the party was good, and the party was great for a little while. But case in point here, Volkswagen. Volkswagen has announced that they are closing first ever production plant closure at a German plant, and this is their main one. Dateline, Dresden, Germany. Talk about the new bombing of Dresden. Volkswagen will halt vehicle production at its Dresden plant this week. This is back in December, marking the first production shutdown at a German site in the automaker's 88-year history. The decision comes as Europe's largest car maker faces mounting cash flow pressure from weak demand in China and Europe, as well as U.S. tariffs affecting American sales. The closure is part of a broader effort to reduce capacity and rein in spending as VW reassesses its 160 billion euro investment plan amid slower than expected electric vehicle adoption and a longer runway for combustion engine cars. Opened in 2002, the Dresden factory produced fewer than 200,000 vehicles and most recently assembled the electric ID.3, having previously served as a showcase for VW engineering with the Phaeton luxury sedan.